Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Fire Theft Radio. We got a good one. We got Aleko Bell back on the show. And, oh, man, he got so many credentials. I'm not even going to repeat them. It's ridiculous. He's a smart man. But we wanted to have him back on just to have a conversation. This is a just easy conversation. We're just talking about our thoughts. I wanted to ask him about what kind of conversations is he having with, UAPs and different things like that in the science world. Him being surrounded by people who are in the science world, going to events that they have debates about biology and theology and things like that. So I feel like he has a good wealth of information to share what it's like to be in that kind of realm of things, and also talking about things that are semi-weird. And also towards the end, we talk about the moral argument for the existence of God and things like that. It's a good little good little potpourri of things that we have on this show. So stick with us, please. And I want to remind you guys, if you want to support us, go over there to firetheftradio.com and click on the support page, because you can't find us through Patreon for whatever reason. They won't get back to us, and if you search on actual Patreon, you can't find us on there, but you can find us on Patreon through our support page, and we can't get that fixed for some reason. But if you don't like Patreon, there's other ways to support the show. I got books. I got little souvenir type things that we can send to you if you want to, Venmo me. Choose your app, and I'll probably have it, and we can go that way if you want to help the show out. Other than that, stick with us. It's going to be a great episode. Here we go. Welcome back, folks, to another episode of Fire Theft Radio. Now, we got Aleko Bell, which I'm proud I said it right the first time. I didn't have to ask him, is that right? Or he didn't have to correct me. And no need for introduction. If you listen to the last episode, lots of credentials, a very smart man. And we wanted to have him back on because he has a great show as well, Intelligent Design Podcast. I've been listening to that for a while. And I like his episodes that he puts out, because sometimes I get a little carried away, unless me and my co-host, whoever's here helping me with. In the world of the fringe, it's easy to get carried away with a lot of the things that we consider to be fringe or that we want to be true. We have a little bit of bias, right? So I wanted to get him back on because even he said, hey, let's talk about UAPs or UFOs. If you don't know what that means, it's the same thing, but or there could be a difference. We'll see. Let's talk about it right now. But and when he said that, I was like, are you kidding me? Of course. Come back on. Let's talk about these things. We love that at Fire Theft Radio. And so we set it up. Here we go. He's all the way over there in England, and I'm over here in America. Welcome back to the show. Aleko Bell, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm fantastic to talk to you again. I really enjoyed the conversation. So looking forward to getting into it.
I'm really glad you chose to go with the hat as well. I wore a hat, you wore a hat, and I'm feeling pretty special that we have that connection right now.
Yeah, I need it. The bald spot is becoming more prominent, so this is instant hair.
Oh, man. Yeah, me too, man. We're around the same age, right? I'm 37 now, so.
36.
There you go. But, hey, I wanted to have you back on. I know you're no longer you were in Vietnam, and you were teaching over there, and now you are in England. How's it going over there?
England's great. Really, really enjoying it here. The weather's quite beautiful. It's just getting warm now. But yeah, I've had the opportunity to do some great things, meet some amazing theologians. I recently went to the premier Unbelievable conference at the British Library in London. where there were some fantastic speakers who came on. Most notably was Calvin Robinson, who um, did represent the Church of England. He's no longer with them, but there were some really amazing thinkers. There were some evolutionary psychologists who discussed the origin of thought. There were, just straight up preachers who had some, some things to say from their missions around the world. Really fascinating.
Hmm. That's why I wanted to have you on, because I know you've been around this quite a bit. I know you have conversations. I know you have even people that are related to you that, think about these things from a scientific approach. And as a person who is a Christian, and also in a sense, you're into what scientists are into. And if I'm not mistaken, you were a scientist as well, right?
Science teacher, yeah. And I never set foot in a laboratory, but I guess when I was educated, but never worked as a scientist, but I was a science teacher. So IGCSE, physics, biology, and chemistry.
Yeah, and so the question is, I guess sometimes knowing these things well, I mean, you're teaching these things, and sometimes it's hard for people to reconcile the fact that you are a believer in God and also in science, and you're teaching scientists and you're teaching physics, you're teaching things that, I don't know, sometimes people think because you know these things, how are you a Christian?
So I think it's actually quite the opposite now. I've said this before, but I recently heard it said among a group of scientists who claim to be Christians at this conference, and it sort of reaffirmed what I was already sort of observing, and that's that hardline sort of atheism is old hat. That's something that was a big trend from,
Right.
I don't know, I could put arbitrary dates out there, but let's just call it like the early 90s to maybe the mid 2000s, maybe 2010s. But what you're seeing today is an emerging trend of quote unquote spiritualism. And a lot of that has to do with things that we touched on before, just things that are esoteric, just kind of unusual. So everything ranging from UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, or UFOs, if you want to call them that, to the big one, in my opinion, is NDEs, near-death experiences, to honest conversations about evolution and about the origin of life. And I think the one that perplexes most is the origin of thought, consciousness. Immaterial things don't come from material things like the mushy matter in your head. So nobody, well, not nobody, but there are a lot of scientists who are not saying definitively, well, it must be something spiritual, but they are saying, hey, wait a minute, it can't just be that this is chemical reactions. It's far too complicated to simply be chemical reactions, especially against, the laws of physics, and namely entropy and thermodynamic equilibrium constant. This is just too complicated.
I bring this up, and the reason I bring it up is because I also see, and I always want to correlate these things just so that people can understand that these are culture drivers, propaganda. I see that a lot in, for example, in the Marvel movies, and I hate to bring that up right now, but I think it's really relevant just because in those movies, when you see the scientists that are interacting with Thor, for example, they're having these really good conversations about science, and also connecting that to the gods of old. They're connecting it to religion. They're connecting it to spirituality. And you see that conversation just growing more and more. One of the biggest that probably is now understood as magic and science is obviously like the Doctor Strange movies. And you see that happen a lot in those movies as well, where there's, this man, very smart surgeon and all that. And then, there's this internal power. It can't be explained. It's not scientific. It's just inexplicable. So there has to be this other thing. And they're really pushing that forward quite a bit. And it's not the only movies, but I only say those because they're the biggest ones that bring it up. But often in the world where you see a movie, a scientist is kind of trying to connect science with spirituality. I see that quite a bit.
Sure, yeah, I think they walk hand in hand. There's no separation of the two. Our our processes can't explain everything, but science is important because it creates curiosity. I mean, if you don't have curiosity, then what's the point of anything, right?
Right. Now, you said, and let's get right into the sauce here, as they say. You said, "Hey, let's talk UAPs." What? I was like, "What? Yeah, let's do that." What do you want to talk about? Let's dive in, man, for sure.
Well, that's a growing trend, isn't it? The UAPs. There's a lot of people talking about it right now.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's more prevalent. Uh, I think, I don't know if we had mentioned it in our show. I know we did it I've said it in the last few episodes that I've recorded. It was funny because mid-COVID, like mid-pandemic, it was like, oh yeah, by the way, they're real and they're not from this planet, and nobody blinked an eye. It was like, cool, let's move on. Like literally the opposite of what people thought. And I feel like, I mean, that was kind of engineered. It's just little by little inching towards the possibility. And so that when they dropped it, it was literally like, oh, that's not exciting enough anymore. Let's, we're dealing with other things right now. I'm like, I'm pretty busy. There was even memes about it. People were like looking at an alien and they were like, hey man, the alien was like, aren't you surprised? He's like, nah, man, I got a lot going on right now. I got to move on. You know what I mean? So, and like, that was that. So, but, what about these UAPs? What's going on? What can we talk about?
Well, I don't know. I had an interesting story myself with regard to UAPs, and it's something that's always been in the back of my mind. When I was on the border of Inner Mongolia on the China side in 2011 or 12. It was deep winter. I was walking at night, walking back from a school that I was working at, and sure enough, yeah, I saw two orange lights in the sky, and they just sort of very matter of fact thing. They were just kind of hovering around each other, and then after I don't know, about maybe 10 seconds, they zipped off faster than anything I've ever seen before. And my first reaction was to call my wife and say, get outside now, come out, come outside, because she was about a block away, but it was, I mean, far north in China, deep winter, and like very cold outside, maybe minus 15, minus 20, something like that. And so I called her, and she, of course, said no. She's like, no, I'm not going outside. It's freezing. And I said, you don't understand. There's two lights in the sky. And as I was talking to her, they came back. They just, in the blink of an eye, they just look like orange circles.
Mm.
And they did the same thing. They stayed where they were, and then they circled. And I'm shouting at her, get outside, come out here, come take a look at this. They stayed there for about 10 seconds or so. And then they zipped off. That was it. And it's not much of a story to tell. It's just a thing that happened. But since then, of course, I've been a little interested because anecdotally, I have three quote unquote out of this world experiences that I have to put into a box, or rather a grand unifying worldview. I have the time that Christ, I feel, called me. When I prayed and he spoke to my heart. I have the few times that I've seen people healed in the name of Christ, and I mean healed of very significant illnesses. And then I have these lights. So in some way or form, for me, and obviously it doesn't work for everybody, I have to fit everything into a box. And as someone who is just call it a practitioner of science, someone who really enjoys it, it requires a little discernment. So I think that there's a lot of really interesting cases going on around the world. At that time, I remember looking up on YouTube, and we did have like vague access to YouTube in China at the time, but they've shut it off since then. But there was the Jerusalem light situation. Did you see that by any chance?
Yes, yeah.
Yes. So there's like 4 amazing tourist cameras that capture this light that comes over the Dome of the Rock.
Right.
The Dome of the Rock is it's the golden domed building in Jerusalem, and that is an Islamic building. But what a lot of people don't know is it's built on top of one of the holiest sites in Christianity and Judaism.
Right.
They kind of claim the spot after a bit of turmoil,
right.
geopolitical turmoil. So that is where they say that Abraham